Jack thought he was just escaping the noise, war zones, camera flashes, and memories he couldn't outrun. But when a stranger in a quiet Bolivian town called him by name and whispered the secret that had haunted him since childhood, Jack realized this wasn't a coincidence. It was a trap, one buried under years of silence and lies. If someone knows what he buried deep, what else do they know? And why now? What if your worst memory wasn't just yours? Jack Miller never liked goodbyes. That's probably why he didn't tell anyone he was leaving. No farewell messages, no tearful airport scenes, just a silent ticket to Bolivia, bought on impulse after his last assignment left him shaking in a hotel room. He was a photojournalist, the kind that runs toward gunfire, but after 10 years chasing war stories and refugee crises, Jack had nothing left to give. The images stayed with him. Children under rubble. Cities swallowed by ash. And always, that feeling he couldn't shake, like something inside him was quietly breaking. He didn't know what he was running from exactly, but Bolivia felt far enough. No one knew him there. No one could ask the questions he was tired of avoiding. But Jack wasn't just escaping the headlines. He was trying to silence a voice that started whispering again each time he closed his eyes. A voice that belonged to a boy he used to be. A scared, confused, lonely kid who once did something he could never take back. It happened when he was just 10. He buried it so deep it barely felt real. Until now. As the plane touched down in La Paz, the air felt thin, heavy, like the weight of a secret was pressing down on him. Jack thought he came here to disappear. But in truth, he came to remember, even if he didn't know it yet. He spent the first few days just walking. No camera, no plan, no real direction. He rode buses that didn't list destinations and ate in roadside shacks where no one asked questions. There was peace in that. The kind of peace that made him think maybe he could start over. He stayed in a small guest house in Copacabana, a sleepy town near Lake Titicaca. The owner, a kind woman named Marta, didn't speak English, and Jack barely spoke Spanish, but she smiled warmly every morning as if they understood each other without words. For a while, it felt safe. Then came the dreams. They were always the same. A basement. A red ball. A locked door. And a child's scream. Jack would wake up gasping, drenched in sweat, convinced someone had been watching him sleep. But no one was ever there. He told himself it was just his brain finally unraveling. Years of trauma catching up. He needed rest, not therapy, not questions. But deep down, something about Bolivia felt familiar. Like he'd been here before. He couldn't explain it. Couldn't place the feeling. But it hovered over him, tugging at the edges of his thoughts. One morning, he planned to take a train to another town further south, a place Marta called San Miguel. The ride was long, the town small. But something about it drew him. Maybe the name. Maybe the way Marta looked at him when he mentioned it, pausing just a second too long before nodding. Jack packed light, grabbed his camera just in case, and headed to the station. The air was dry, the sky unusually clear. It felt like a new beginning. But something in his chest tightened, like he was being pulled toward something, not away. He ignored it. That was a habit of his. At the platform, he watched a group of children playing with a stick and a bottle cap. One of them looked at him and tilted his head, like he recognized Jack. But that was impossible. Jack turned away, trying to shake the unease. That's when he noticed the man sitting on the bench. He was old, maybe in his 70s, wearing a weathered hat and a dark coat despite the heat. His eyes were locked on Jack. Not in a friendly way. Not even curious. But knowing. Familiar. Like he'd been waiting. Jack tried to look away, but something about the man's gaze froze him. And then the man smiled, not kindly, but softly. Almost. Sadly. He didn't say anything. Not yet. But Jack felt it in his bones. That man knew him. And Jack was about to find out why. Jack stood stiffly near the edge of the train platform, pretending to look for the incoming train but secretly glancing at the old man on the bench. The man hadn't moved. He just sat there, hands resting on a wooden cane, eyes locked on Jack like he had all the time in the world. The other people on the platform bustled past, mothers with children, local farmers carrying baskets. None of them gave the man a second look. But Jack couldn't stop looking. There was something about the man's face. Not just the wrinkles or the scars across his cheek, but the expression. Like he knew something Jack didn't. Something Jack had forgotten. Jack shifted his weight, uncomfortable under the man's stare. Finally, he stepped closer, thinking maybe he'd just ask if the man needed help or was waiting for someone. But before he could say a word, the man spoke. His voice was calm, almost friendly, but each word hit like a hammer. Jack Henry Miller. Born February 17, 1992. Your favorite hiding place as a child was the cellar beneath your grandmother's house. You were afraid of the dark, but you always went down there to cry after it happened. Do you remember what happened, Jack? Jack froze. His heart dropped. He couldn't breathe. He'd never told anyone about the cellar. Not a soul. That hiding spot was his secret, the only place he felt safe after what he did that day. After the accident. The man didn't blink. He wasn't guessing. He knew. Jack opened his mouth to speak, but nothing came out. His mind was racing. Who was this man? How did he know that name? That date? That place? Before Jack could gather a word, the man slowly stood. His knees creaked, and he leaned on the cane as he stepped closer. He looked smaller up close. Not threatening, just sad. The way someone looks when they carry too much history. The man leaned in and whispered, "They told me you forgot. But I knew you'd come back. You always had to come back. Bolivia is in your bones." Then he slipped something into Jack's hand. A small, worn-out box, tied with twine. And just like that, he turned and walked away. No explanation. No name. Just silence and footsteps fading into the crowd. Jack stood there, unable to move. His palm was sweaty around the box. The train pulled in moments later, but Jack didn't board. He didn't even look at the schedule. He just stared at the direction the man had disappeared into, unsure if he had imagined it. But the box was real. Heavy. Cold. He sat down on the same bench, unwrapped the twine slowly, fingers shaking. The lid creaked open, and what he saw inside made his blood run cold. There were 4 things inside the box. A child's red marble. A black and white photo of Jack at around 6 years old, missing his front teeth and holding a stick with a ribbon tied to it. A torn corner of a page, yellowed with age, with his handwriting. He recognized it instantly, a sentence he wrote when he was little, from a diary he thought had been lost decades ago. It read, "I didn't mean to hurt him. I just wanted to make him stop crying." And the last item, a broken watch. His brother's watch. The one Jack thought he lost the day everything changed. Jack clutched the box to his chest, looking around in panic. The people near him looked normal, like they didn't notice anything strange. He wanted to scream, to demand someone tell him what was happening. But he stayed silent. His thoughts spiraled. How could someone have these things? That diary had been buried with old family boxes when they moved. The watch had vanished when he was a kid. And the marble. That marble was given to him by a boy named Simon. A boy who disappeared when Jack was 10. The same boy Jack swore never to talk about again. He stood up and started walking, fast. He didn't know where he was going, but he had to move. Maybe to find the man. Maybe just to breathe. He ducked into side streets, scanning faces, checking shadows. But the man was gone. Jack circled back to the platform. Nothing. He walked to the station office and asked if anyone had seen an old man in a dark coat. The woman at the desk gave him a strange look and said no one like that had come through today. Jack insisted. She asked if he was feeling all right. He stopped asking after that. That night, back at the guest house, Jack didn't sleep. He placed the box on the small table beside his bed and stared at it. Over and over. The items were real. They hadn't changed. Each one had a piece of his past tied to it, pieces he never expected to see again. He tried calling his mother back in the States, but the signal was weak and the call never went through. He pulled out an old notebook and started writing everything down, dates, memories, questions. He underlined one sentence again and again. How did he know about the cellar? By morning, Jack knew he couldn't go to San Miguel. That plan was gone. He had to find the man. Or at least find someone who knew him. He asked Marta about old men who might have lived nearby, but she shook her head. Then, when he showed her the box, her smile faded. Her hand trembled slightly. She said something quickly in Spanish and left the room. When she returned, she looked nervous. She told Jack he should leave town. That some places were not meant to be returned to. Jack didn't understand what she meant. But he knew one thing: Bolivia wasn't random. Someone brought him here. And they were just getting started. Jack didn't leave his room the next day. He barely moved at all. The box sat on the wooden table, open, its contents laid out like puzzle pieces from a nightmare. Each item was too specific, too real to be coincidence. The marble, the torn diary page, the watch, the photograph, every one of them pointed to a past he had worked his whole life to forget. His hands trembled each time he picked one up. He tried to tell himself there had to be an explanation. Maybe someone from his family had come to Bolivia and planted the box. Maybe a stranger stole things from his childhood home and tracked him down. But the truth was worse. No one alive had access to all of it. And certainly not anyone in Bolivia. Jack had burned those bridges long ago. He pulled his backpack close and dug out his laptop. The Wi-Fi was slow, almost useless, but he managed to pull up an old file from years ago. It was a scanned version of the very diary he kept as a kid, something he thought he deleted after his therapist recommended he let go of the past. He searched through the pages and found the original version of the torn piece in the box. The sentence matched word for word. His handwriting. Same ink, same phrasing. He remembered writing it while hiding under the stairs. His brother was in the hospital. His parents were fighting. And Jack, scared and confused, had convinced himself he caused it. He wrote that line the same night he vowed to never speak of it again. Yet here it was. Torn out and delivered by a man he'd never met. His thoughts turned to Simon. The boy with the marble. His neighbor. His only friend back then. Simon vanished when Jack was 10. No one ever found out what happened. There were rumors. A runaway. A tragic accident. Some said he got lost in the woods. But Jack remembered that day too clearly. They were playing in the basement. Simon had found the cellar door unlocked. He wanted to explore. And Jack, still angry about the fight with his brother, told him to go ahead. He never came out. Jack screamed for help. By the time his parents found him, the cellar was empty. Jack told them he never saw Simon. And they believed him. He shook his head, heart pounding. This wasn't just trauma coming back. Someone knew everything. Someone was watching. Jack left the guest house just after sunrise, hoping to retrace the man's steps from the train station. The streets were quiet. Most shops were still closed. But a small fruit vendor on the corner was setting up. Jack showed her the photo of the old man he had managed to sketch in his notebook, but she just shook her head. Then a teenage boy nearby looked over and said he might have seen someone like that heading toward the lake trail the morning before. Jack thanked him and made his way toward the water. The path was narrow and uneven, lined with thick bushes and large stones. It curved around the edge of Lake Titicaca, offering a view of calm blue water stretching out toward the horizon. It should have been peaceful. But Jack's nerves were on fire. He couldn't shake the feeling that someone was watching him. The further he walked, the more that feeling grew. He turned around twice, expecting to catch someone behind him. Nothing. Just trees and silence. He reached an old bench near the edge of a cliff that overlooked the lake. The wood was chipped, the metal frame rusted. But someone had sat there recently. Fresh footprints in the dirt, cigarette ash on the ground. Jack sat down, unsure what he was even hoping to find. Then he noticed something in the grass below. Another box. Identical to the first. Tied with the same twine. His heart stopped. He looked around. Still alone. He picked up the box slowly and opened it. Inside was a single item. A Polaroid photo. It showed Jack standing at the train station. Taken from a distance. The timestamp on the bottom said it was taken just one day earlier, right before the old man approached him. On the back, someone had written, "Do you see now? You were never alone." Jack staggered backward. Who took this? Who had been following him that close without him noticing? The panic rose in his throat like bile. He turned and ran back toward town, gripping the photo in one hand and the original box in the other. Every shadow now felt like a person. Every rustle in the trees sent his heart racing. He didn't know who was playing this game, but they were inside his head. They knew his patterns, his fears, his past. Back at the guest house, Marta wasn't there. The front door was locked. Jack banged on it until her daughter, a girl no older than 10, came to open it. She looked up at him with wide eyes and said something he couldn't understand. He crouched and showed her the photo. She pointed toward the back room. Jack went in, expecting to find Marta, but instead found his room had been turned over. His bag emptied. The diary notes scattered. And the photo he left on the table was gone. He backed out slowly and left the house without a word. Jack made his way to the edge of town, where the only cafe with working internet was located. He connected his laptop again and searched the name he had seen on the torn diary page, a name he hadn't noticed at first. In the corner of the page, someone had scribbled a name in blue ink, Lazaro. It sounded like a name from a dream. But the search returned something unexpected. A record from the early 2000s, a closed case from a clinic in La Paz. The name appeared in a research file. Jack clicked the link, but access was denied. Suddenly, a new message popped up on his screen. An email.
No sender.
No subject. Just one sentence. You've opened the first box. Now remember what was in the second one. Jack stared at the screen. He hadn't told anyone about the second box yet. No one. And yet, someone already knew. Jack didn't sleep that night. He kept the lights on, windows shut, and the photo from the second box clutched in his hand. Every creak in the walls made him jump. He kept checking the hallway, the shadows, even the corners of the ceiling like he was expecting someone to drop from it. When morning came, he left the guest house without saying goodbye. He had a bag, his notebook, the 2 boxes, and a mind unraveling at the seams. He went straight to the post office in town, hoping to trace the packages, but the worker behind the desk said there was no record of anything being sent to his name. Jack asked about the name Lazaro. The man paused, then said nothing and closed the window. Jack spent the rest of the day wandering the streets, asking anyone who would talk if they knew the name or the man who gave him the box. Everyone either shook their head or looked away. One old woman, hunched and sitting outside a church, gave him a strange smile and whispered, "He waits where the wind forgets." Jack had no idea what that meant. He didn't get the chance to ask again because she stood up and hobbled away before he could get another word out. He wandered aimlessly until nightfall, then found another guest house to stay in, this one on the edge of town. It had a view of the hills and fewer people. Jack wanted silence, but the silence only made the questions louder. The next morning, he found the first letter. It was slid under his door, sealed in a plain white envelope with no name on the outside. Inside was a short note, typed in perfect English, on yellowed paper. It said, "You used to cry in your sleep until they gave you the shot. After that, you forgot Simon. But Simon never forgot you. Now it's your turn to remember." There was no signature. Jack stared at the letter, heart pounding, mouth dry. Who was sending this? How did they know he was here? And what shot were they talking about? He spent hours thinking about it. He'd been to therapists. He had been told trauma could do strange things to memory, especially when it happened young. But he always thought the gaps in his past were because of how painful it was, not because someone made him forget. But this wasn't just therapy talk. Someone was pointing him toward something real. He went to a local internet cafe and searched his medical records, but all the files before age 11 were missing. The system just said, "No data available." That evening, another letter came. This time it was waiting on his pillow. Jack had locked the door. The window was shut. No one should have been able to get in. He picked up the envelope with shaking hands. The second note read, "You were never supposed to leave. But when the fire happened, they let you go. You were their only success. The others didn't make it. Do you remember the dream with the red door? It wasn't a dream." Jack dropped the letter like it was burning his fingers. His dreams. The ones that came every night since he got to Bolivia. The red door. The screams. The basement. The boy with no face. Jack fell into the chair, dizzy. He remembered something, a hallway, bright lights, walls with mirrors. People in white coats. He was sitting on a cold floor, knees to his chest. Someone was whispering numbers to him. Over and over. It was gone in a second. Just a flash. But it was real. He knew it was real. The next day, he bought a local map and spread it out on his bed. He circled every town nearby, looking for anything that stood out. Then he saw it, a small mountain village called Rosario del Monte. It was barely marked. Just a dot with a road leading into the hills. But something about the name sent chills through his spine. He packed up and took a local bus as far as it would go, then walked the last 5 miles up the trail, feet aching, lungs burning from the altitude. The village was silent when he arrived. Small houses made of stone, a church with a broken bell, and maybe a dozen people. Jack tried asking around, but most people either didn't speak English or simply walked away. He was about to leave when a girl approached him. She looked about 12 and had bright eyes and a necklace made of marbles. Jack asked her where she got it. She pointed to an old building near the edge of the village and said one word, "Doctor." The building was half collapsed, with ivy climbing the walls. Jack entered through a broken door. The inside smelled of mold and dust. On the walls were torn medical posters, diagrams of brains and nervous systems. There was a filing cabinet in the corner. Most of it was empty. But one drawer opened with a loud creak and inside were a stack of old folders. Jack flipped through them. Names. Ages. Notes. All in Spanish. But some had English scribbled in the margins. Then he saw his name. Miller. Jack Henry. Age 8. Subject number 7. Test Group D. He turned the page. It described something called phase memory reassignment and a series of injections meant to suppress traumatic events. Jack kept flipping. Another page mentioned Simon. Subject number 8. Failed integration. Presumed deceased. There were photos, diagrams of brain scans, and then one final note. Subject number 7 released due to fire outbreak. Program shut down. No further monitoring authorized. Jack sat down on the dusty floor, clutching the folder. It wasn't just trauma. It wasn't just bad dreams. He had been part of something. A program. An experiment. He didn't just forget. He was made to forget. And Simon, he had been there too. But he didn't make it out. That night, Jack slept in the abandoned building. He was too shaken to go anywhere else. And when he woke up, there was a third letter beside his bag. It said, "There are still more like you. You were never the only one. Come to where it began. We're waiting." Jack left Rosario del Monte with a growing storm inside him. Everything he thought he knew had started to collapse. The letters, the files, the words subject number 7 written beside his name, it was all too much. He walked the dirt trail down the mountain in silence, the folder hidden under his jacket, eyes scanning every tree, every shadow. He was no longer just searching for answers. Now he was trying to figure out if any part of his life had been real. Had he ever truly made choices, or had he been led this entire time? He felt like a man walking backward through time, retracing steps he didn't remember taking. At the edge of the trail, he found a wooden sign pointing toward a dense jungle path. It was half broken, covered in moss, but carved into the wood were 3 words in faded paint, Proyecto Espejo Central. He stared at it for a long time. Mirror Project. That's what espejo meant. He hadn't seen those words before, but they rang like a bell in the back of his mind. He adjusted his backpack and walked into the jungle. The air grew thick, the light dim. Vines hung low. Every step felt heavier. The path narrowed until it was no more than a space between trees, barely wide enough to squeeze through. After 2 hours, Jack saw the remains of a metal fence, bent and rusted, barely standing. Behind it stood a large concrete building, covered in vines and cracked with age. The windows were broken, doors hanging from rusted hinges. A faded government seal was barely visible on the wall. He stepped inside. The smell hit him first, mildew, dust, and something older, like a place untouched for decades. The floor was covered in papers, broken glass, and empty syringes. Lights dangled from the ceiling, some still swinging slightly, though there was no wind. Jack walked down a dark hallway, flashlight in hand, the beam cutting through the thick air. He passed rooms labeled in Spanish: evaluation, memory recording, behavioral testing. Most were empty. But one room still had power. A faint humming sound came from behind a metal door with no handle. He hesitated, then pushed it open. Inside was a circular room with a chair in the center and mirrors lining every wall. The mirrors weren't normal. They pulsed faintly with a light that seemed to come from within. Jack stepped closer. His reflection stared back at him, but something was wrong. It didn't move exactly as he did. It was slightly off, delayed. He raised a hand. The reflection raised it slower. He blinked. The reflection didn't. His breath caught in his throat. Then, in the mirror, he saw someone standing behind him. He spun around. No one there. He looked back at the mirror. The figure was gone. But Jack's reflection was still off. It looked at him now, directly. Not like a mirror, but like a person trapped behind glass. Then it mouthed something. Jack leaned closer, heart pounding. The reflection mouthed one word: remember. He stumbled back. The mirrors flashed, and suddenly he was overwhelmed by sound. Screaming. Children crying. Footsteps running. Alarms blaring. His head felt like it was splitting open. He dropped to his knees and clutched his skull. Images poured into his mind: a hallway, a locked room, doctors with needles, a boy strapped to a chair, another boy crying, a fire, the smell of smoke, and hands dragging him through a tunnel. The flashes were fast, blinding. And then everything stopped. The room went dark. Jack sat there, shaking. The mirrors were black now. Just glass. His reflection returned to normal. But the memories didn't leave. They stayed in his mind, crawling out from the corners like spiders. He remembered Simon screaming in the basement. He remembered standing outside the locked door, too scared to open it. He remembered the fire and the way he was pulled away by a woman with white hair who kept saying, "You're the lucky one." And he remembered more, other children. Other rooms. One boy with a number stitched into his shirt. Another girl who never spoke but screamed in her sleep. Jack stood slowly. He knew now that he wasn't just part of a failed experiment. He was one of many. And he was the only one who got out. This place, the project, the whole structure, it had been buried for a reason. But someone had opened it again. Someone had led him back. And he wasn't sure if they wanted him to remember or if they wanted to see what he would do with the truth. He wandered deeper into the building. At the far end was an office, still mostly intact. Papers were scattered across the floor. One folder stood out, newer than the rest. Inside were profiles. Names. Faces. Ages. All different, but all under 20. Subjects. Test groups. Locations. It wasn't just Bolivia. There were other places. Other labs. Active labs. On the last page, written in red ink, was a message: Miller is active. Observation resumed. Phase 2 begins on contact. Jack felt his legs weaken. Someone had been waiting for him to find this. Someone was watching him. Not just in Bolivia. Maybe for years. Maybe since he was released. Maybe every choice he'd made, becoming a photojournalist, coming to Bolivia, the people he met, was all part of it. The boxes. The letters. Even the old man at the train station. It wasn't random. It never was. He left the facility at dusk. The jungle was darker now. The air colder. He walked quickly, checking over his shoulder every few minutes. The silence felt heavier than before. When he reached the edge of the trees, he found something new. A campfire, still burning. No one around. But beside the fire was a third box. Inside was a photo. It was Jack. Not as he looked now, but at age 10. And standing next to him, smiling, was Simon. Behind them were men in white coats. And behind them, the mirror room. Jack stared at the photo in his hand, unable to blink. His younger self looked happy, even proud, as he stood beside Simon in front of that terrible room of mirrors. But it wasn't just the photo that disturbed him. It was what it meant. That moment, the room, the doctors, the photo being taken, was never supposed to exist in his memory. It was a piece of time they had cut out of his mind. But here it was, printed on glossy paper, staring back at him like a ghost returned from the dead. Simon looked real. Alive. Not the memory of a boy lost, but a boy who had once lived beside Jack in whatever that facility really was. That place wasn't a hospital. It wasn't even a lab. It was something else. Something built for a purpose no child should have ever been part of. Jack packed the photo and the third box in his bag and started walking. The campfire was still warm, and it filled him with dread. Someone had just been here. Maybe they still were. But he didn't run. He walked slowly through the dark trees, flashlight swinging in shaky hands, his thoughts louder than the forest. The truth was sinking in fast now. He was never free. Not when he left the facility. Not when he crossed the ocean. Not when he buried the memory of Simon. They had let him go because they wanted to watch him. They needed to know what would happen to someone who forgot everything and lived as if nothing had happened. Jack had been the final test. By the time he reached the nearest road, the sky was starting to lighten with the early signs of dawn. He hitched a ride on a farmer's truck going toward La Paz. The man didn't speak a word the entire drive, just stared ahead with a blank expression. Jack leaned back in the seat and tried to rest, but every time he closed his eyes, he saw Simon's face. Not just in the photo, but the last time he saw him, crying, trapped in the cellar, calling for help. Jack had run. He had been too scared to go back down. And now he wasn't sure if that had been the first time Simon had disappeared or just the last time Jack had a choice. Back in the city, Jack checked into a hotel using a fake name. He couldn't risk being found yet. He spent the entire day researching the Mirror Project. Nothing came up. No records, no news articles, nothing in English or Spanish. But when he dug deeper into government archives from the 90s, he found a small reference. Proyecto Espejo, Phase 1, initiated 1992, discontinued following fire damage. That was all. No details. No names. No survivors listed. Just a footnote in a pile of forgotten data. It confirmed what he feared. The world never knew what had happened. And maybe that was the point. It was designed to vanish. To bury everything beneath layers of silence and lies. The final clue came in the form of a knock at his door. Jack jumped to his feet, eyes wide, hand on the handle of the drawer where he'd hidden a rusted pocket knife. But when he opened the door, no one was there. Just a flash drive on the floor. No note. No message. Just the drive. Jack shut the door, locked it, and plugged it into his laptop with shaking hands. A single file loaded. A video. Grainy footage. It showed a young boy sitting at a table, eyes wide, hooked up to wires and monitors. A man in a lab coat asked questions. The boy didn't answer. The man asked again, louder. Then the boy nodded. The video jumped. Now the boy was screaming. The screen showed his brainwaves. Spikes. Surges. Then flat lines. And then a voice off camera said, Subject 8, terminated. Begin reset of Subject 7. Jack slammed the laptop shut. Simon wasn't missing. Simon had died there. And they erased it from Jack's mind. Not to protect him. To protect the program. He sat on the floor, heart pounding, the world spinning around him. They had trained him to forget. And the moment he got too close, they reminded him just enough to finish the job. That was what the stranger in Bolivia was for. To bring him back. To trigger the memory. To see if it would all come rushing out. The boxes. The letters. The photos. It was all part of a map, a controlled maze with only one exit, truth. And now that he knew, he had a choice to make. He could run again. Or he could burn it down. Jack packed everything, the boxes, the files, the flash drive, into a single bag. He left the hotel and went straight to the embassy, pretending he was just another traveler needing help. But once inside, he passed a note to a staff member. It said, confidential evidence of illegal experiments on minors in South America. Do not contact local police. Leak everything. He slipped the flash drive into the man's pocket before walking away. He left Bolivia that night using a forged passport. On the plane, he didn't sleep. He just stared out the window and thought about Simon. About the others. The names in the folders he hadn't memorized. Faces he didn't know. Lives cut off before they even began. He wondered how many of them had made it out. How many were still being watched. He wondered how long it would be before they found him again. In his coat pocket, he kept the red marble from the first box. The one Simon gave him all those years ago. It was the only thing that felt real anymore. Everything else, his job, his childhood, his identity, had been shaped by people in white coats who believed they could erase pain with chemicals and silence. But they forgot one thing. Memory is not just something stored in the mind. It lives in the body. It hides in the dreams. And when the time is right, it comes back. Even if it kills you. Jack didn't know where he would go next. But he knew he would never stop searching. Not for revenge. Not for peace. But for every child who never got to grow up.